Kind of looks like you. No.
He didn't die.
He's a tenacious bastard.
Yes. So welcome to Two Devs on the Couch.
I'm Björn.
I'm Arash. Or John, by the way. It just depends what I pick on a certain day. I go by many names. So what are we talking about?
So today we're talking about testing your game. That's what we're currently in the phase of our game. It's still not yet there, but that's the thing we're gonna work on today to kind of get it into the first version that is testable. So we're gonna talk a bit about just our thoughts about testing, why we think it's important, and
I would say based off of my own personal experiences and the companies I've worked for, in my opinion, testing in those bigger companies actually comes a lot later than it should. But I would say that if you're an indie development studio, indie as in, I don't know, that fluctuates, a team of 1 and under 7, please don't kill me, internet, if I've broken what an indie team is. Maybe they can be bigger, when you're a smaller studio, you can be more agile. We need to have one of those terminology, like cling, and then there's a little definition here.
terminology.
So, but what you want to do is basically what we're trying to do and what you should do. And by the way, you can not do any of this. We're not saying we're the masters of everything. This is just what we're doing and what I would say is more successful. And based off of stuff we've read that...
kind of sharing our thoughts on the topic.
Yeah. You could say that we're complete idiots and make your own choice. But I would say the best thing you want to do is you want to get as fast as you can to a workable prototype. And by prototype, I mean it shows the basic mechanics, terminology, but basically how your game plays. So if somebody were to play your game, this is the basic idea or premise of what. And by premise or idea, I don't mean like story or something like this, unless that's central to what your game is. But how the game functions, what are the actions that the player takes. So,
this could even be done by something called white boxing, where you just have white boxes
exactly.
on the screen. So the graphics don't matter. The thing that's usually tends to matter is the interaction, like what kind of interactions can you do, and
the basic loop of what's happening.
Yeah.
I would say they call it the core loop, which is kind of the main thing that the player of your game will be doing over and over and over and over. And you can have many different loops. You don't have to have just one. So, for example, you attack something, you kill it, it gives you some coins, and you collect the coin, and that could be the loop. Or it could be, in addition, then you do something with the coin.
Upgrade your gear, enables you to kill more or kill something different.
Yeah. And then that going and taking those coins to a shop somewhere, that can actually be a separate thing altogether, because maybe there's multiple shops. Maybe you have a choice of what you do with the money that you got. So
so we're getting our first kind of prototype. We call it Alpha 1, ready for testing. And of course we already know kind of like,
it's like pre.
Yeah. Like at this point when we have just barely the first, I don't want to call it even the first version, something working. Let's call it something working. What we're looking for is to see how the people are interacting with it. Where does their mind go? Because we do know that the game is so basic that it doesn't give a good representation of the final game. Yeah. But that doesn't matter. We'll anyway kind of have some kind of learning of oh, look, they thought that this part was really interesting, or they had really much fun with this part, just doing something simple, and we thought that that was just something that didn't matter or something extra. And then you can then build upon those strengths. So you kind of find the strengths of your game. And I think that's important, because I think that only really, really good developers know the strengths of the game before, it's done.
We hope.
We hope. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's a talent. It's not something we hope. I mean, there is not that many know how to do that. That's why there's not a million.
Yeah. Not everybody is amazing.
No.
So.
This is like, I'm talking about like, not even the 1%. I'm talking about there's a promille.
Yeah. And speaking of fun, don't get too caught up in the beginning of like trying to get everything the exact way you picture it in your, mind's eye or dream about. Just that some type of function is there to get the idea, because when you go and have people test this, hopefully it's in the very beginning. Well, we can talk about that too. Like, you want to try to find people, of course, get it in front of as many people as you can. But the most important type of people should be people that you think would be the audience of this game that you're trying to create, because the feedback that you're going to be getting from them is a little bit more valuable than, my mom or something like that. So, but you should take, I mean, of course, it doesn't hurt, show it to as many people, because there might be something interesting you might find, or you might find out there's a totally different game there for a totally different audience.
So when thinking about audience, the best way maybe to approach it, to find and define your audience, is to think about your hardcore fans. Who would your hardcore fans, who will devote their lives for this game? Because
sell their souls.
I've noticed there's a lot of people who have a problem with kind of that when you ask them about the audience, they say, well, everybody or anybody could play it, which is true. Technically, anybody could play it. Anybody could, except the people, if you have a controller, the people without hands can't play it. Yeah. Maybe they can use and then you'll say, well, they can use their feet. But that's not the point of defining an audience. Defining an audience is to find those hardcore fans, those really, really people who love it, and they'll spend a lot of money, spend a lot of time and effort and a lot of dialogue with you. And you want to really make those people happy.
And they're also your cheerleaders or your poster boys. I don't want to get stereotyping of using gender, but basically those are the people that are screaming from the rooftops and, oh, this is amazing, you should play it. And when your game is released and it's awesome, they're going to be doing all the let's plays, and they're going to be playing it over and over and telling everybody about it. And so those are kind of, you want to find that audience, and you want to nurture that audience, and the feedback you get from them is actually really important. It looks like we're having some minor
I'm just adjusting
adjustments.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yes.
I'm showing
you weren't
my
coming
cleavage.
you weren't as beautiful. Now it's much better, 1%. So that's really important. But what I was saying earlier was
so once you know that, so you're like, yeah, I'm gonna develop a FPS game. This guy, a friend of a friend, he's really into FPS games and this type of FPS games even. I'll show it to him first and see what he thinks, instead of going like someone who likes strategy, because then he's gonna, he will enjoy different things in the game. It's a bit like just like in movies, like not everybody enjoys romantic comedy. Then, if you show it to someone who hates romantic comedies, his feedback will...
It's like asking your plumber for help with your car or something. It's not the exact same. Maybe that's a bad analogy. But
maybe, but I think you still understand the point of, because... and in a way, you also kind of build an audience while testing, because once they test it, if your test... I don't want to say it's successful, it always is successful, but I mean, when maybe you're on to the right game and you have a really good idea, you'll notice that the testers will start following its progress, and they're kind of really kind of
Maybe we can go a little bit more detail in that. Like, just one thing, just to kind of give you, like, we'll take a couple steps back. That one, any feedback you get, you can take it with a grain of salt. You're not always looking. Sometimes the answer that you get from your feedback is not on the surface. Actually, the feedback you're getting might seem very poor, or it might be a different problem, but you might realize that there's something else there below the surface in what it is that you've gotten from this person, and it's actually a different problem, and solving that would solve this and also make your game better. The other thing is, you don't have to listen to those people. Because they might not understand certain aspects of your game, or they might not see it as far along. You should explain it to the people that, hey, this is just the beginning. Of course, all this stuff's going to change and whatever. So try not to look at that. Just get an idea, from playing. So,
well, I think the most important thing is to actually interfere with them as little as possible while they're testing.
Yeah.
You always have a opportunity after you kind of tested it to kind of talk to them, and then you can push your point of view on them. Or like in the beginning, it's very important to kind of take a step back. If of course they have a technical problem, like they don't know how the mouse is disconnected from the computer, you can help them connect the mouse. But don't explain everything. Don't even if the tutorial is not ready, which is never is. Don't let them just play, because you'll notice much more when you just keep quiet and you just look at what they do. Just sit there with a notebook. Maybe even if you have someone who can help you, who's not involved at all in the game development, and have them interact with the person, and you can just sit back a bit, like to the side, and just follow what happens. Yeah. Because when you're testing, that's your job, to be the kind of, you look at what they do. Your job is not to tell them what they should think.
Yeah. If they ask you questions, by the way, you can, if you have another person, it's great, because they can relay the questions back and forth to you, and you can maybe write down on a piece of paper so you're not even talking. But if they are asking you, like, what about this, or is this what I'm supposed to do? It's better to just ask a question like, what do you think you should be doing here? Don't tell them at all what they should do. Just let them try to say, like, what would you do if you were doing this? Or how do you think that it should be working? Try to speak in this way.
And also a thing that, like when starting, like for example, one technique is to tell the tester that, to speak out their mind while they're playing. So you're not guessing what they're thinking. So let's say I'm playing something, you would be like, oh, I'm opening now the door. I'm looking through the door. Oh, what's to the left? What's to the left? What's to the right? It's like a let's play actually. But like you're like, oh, and then they kind of, oh, I don't understand this, and then you will have an easier time understanding why don't they understand it. Like why is the confusion happening, or why, and that then leads to kind of the thing that you were talking about, that they might not understand the whole picture of the game, and you'll instantly understand that when you hear them talking, or if there is something you're miscommunicating. Usually, like miscommunicating a game, like there could be something where you thought that it would be self-explanatory that when you see a door that people will open it, but that might be not true, because something is weird. I don't know. There's two doors and they keep clicking on the door that doesn't even open or something.
Another thing
thinking it's broken or something. I don't know.
In addition to that, this kind of user psychology thing, you can also look at body language too, or facial expression. If you're able to be in a situation where you could see the screen and their face, or at different times, sometimes you can actually read from a person's face. They might not even say anything, but their face is really, really confused. Like, oh, what the hell am I supposed to be doing? And they might not say it, but you can tell, like, oh, every time somebody is at this point doing this thing, they seem frustrated. And at that time, you could, it's actually okay to talk in that case and say, like, oh, you seem frustrated or something. Maybe you can, tell me what's going on in your mind. So if they're very quiet, this is one way to, kind of connect their emotions to them verbally speaking them out. So, but yeah.
So now we covered kind of like, okay, find target audience, find those people, you set up the test, tell them to speak out their thoughts out loud. Don't interact with them in the beginning too much. You can do that later. If you have a person help you, like if you can get a friend to help you or something who's not involved in the development at all, get them and just brief them of how to, just start the game and then
and that scenario you could just quickly explain that they'll just basically explain, here's the thing, this is the controller, you can move around, and they'll figure out the rest. And then if they have a question, they will tell the person, and they will then actually, of course, you can hear it too. But if you have a question, actually, I would, like Björn said, to wait afterwards. But if you have to ask a question, and in that scenario, you can also write down the question, hand it over to the guy or girl, and they will ask it in your behalf. And this kind of, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent now, but
no, it's okay.
One thing that's really important here is that as a designer, you need to kind of be able to separate yourself from your game, and because it's an art form, so says the U.S. Supreme Court. But it's an art form, and like any artist, we can be really emotional and really have things they become our darlings. We're very close to them and we protect them. And what happens is sometimes when someone gives you a certain feedback, it can be kind of you feel like if you take it the wrong way, it feels like it's an attack on you, like, oh, you don't understand my.
Well, you'll get that feeling that they just they don't understand the game, and I think the important thing to there is to kind of keep calm, like disconnect yourself from the kind of, like, don't feel like don't think about too much,
and then critique on you.
Yeah, and then or not an attack on your game. But then the most valuable thing you can, because that's an opportunity for you to see what does that person think. Because in the end, that person's thoughts, they're important, but, they're their thoughts. And this is an opportunity for you to learn about how do they think. And then, like John said in the beginning, you can either disregard it or regard it. So it's up to you to kind of decide how much you listen. An important thing there again, so it's always a balance, and you always have to be analytical about it, that don't run off after every idea someone has. It's easy to get excited especially when you have someone who really loves the genre. They'll start spitballing features, and don't get lost in your vision. Keep your vision, but take seriously what they say and think about why did they perceive that game that way, and is there anything that you could do without having to, like, the usual thing is like, they're like, hey, this would be awesome if it had multiplayer, for example, or some big feature, and you're like, well, it will have in 2 years, we'll develop, and no, it's coming, and instead think about like, why did they feel that way, and then is there something you can do to kind of, without creating that whatever feature X, that huge feature, there's something maybe you can do before that. There's just minor tweaks, and then you retest with the same person like a couple of weeks later, and then they're like, yeah, this is much better, and you didn't develop that huge feature X even.
And you don't have to promise anything. So if someone's like, yeah, you gotta have, I don't know, auto aiming, say, okay, I'll take that down. I'll take a note of it. So you don't have to promise anything to anybody. It's your game in that sense. But I think you were kind of moving on to this, which was that. So what happens next after the testing?
So then now, after you've tested, of course, you then can talk freely. Like, I think, after you've done and you've taken your notes, and then of course you can just have a casual conversation with the person, and then if you feel like you have to defend your game, you can do that. But at least you've taken this kind of analytical stance before that, so you have your own notes. Of course, it's always good to not maybe attack them too much, but I mean, now you've done that, but then you, of course, then just take care of the person, make sure they're happy. If you're offering them something, dinner or a movie ticket, or just
you should, that's a good point actually, is that you should give them something, whatever that is. Even if it's just being kind to them. But at the very least, it's nice to. I mean, if they're your close friend, that's a different thing. But what was?
But I think by giving something, sometimes the only thing you need to give is just asking if they want to be involved in the future, so they feel like part of the project, they feel part of the community, and you can even write down their email and say like, hey, if there's any news, if you're interested in this game, we'll submit you the game once it's ready. You'll get a free copy, so you don't have to like be like, here's money or something. It's like if you're indie especially, you don't have a lot of money.
Exactly. I would be careful to you want to get them excited about what you're trying to do, but you also, how can I see that? You want to keep them as virgin as possible too, because if you want to use them for testing again and you explain way too much, then what's going to happen is in the back of their mind while they're playing, our food is done or is burning in the oven.
Yeah.
Oh, but,
time to eat, bye. No, I'm just kidding.
Soon we must leave. For food, we must eat. But what the hell was I saying?
I have no idea.
Anyway, keep them virgins in the sense of that you don't want to give them so much that when they're playing your game, even when it's broken, they're going to be like, oh yeah, this will be fixed and this is how it'll work. Instead, it's better to give them the basic idea, and then these other things you can still use them in the future again. And then you do want to kind of mix up your pool of people that you're using, so that, because if you keep using the same person over and over and over again, it's really cool, but they kind of become a different type of help for you. There's one that is a fresh set of eyes, and then there's one that they kind of see.
For every batch you should always have someone new. There's like, I would say 2 reasons. One is that once the person, even if they played an earlier version, they'll already know some things like how to control the character. So if it's again broken, like your first time flow or something is broken, or how you introduce the game, you won't know because the person already knows your game. 2 is that for every tester you're getting someone who's a fan of your game. So you're building. It's a kind of very effective way of building if you're just starting out, this is the first game you're making, you're creating some kind of audience, someone who, you can have a dialogue on. You can add them to a Facebook group and you can send them messages, and then you kind of get it escalating.
Exactly. And you should always have a way that you're communicating with these people and telling them, oh, this is happening, we're doing this, hey.
Always treat them with respect. I was just saying that part that, do wait until you finish the testing if you have some kind of that you really, really want to tell. But the best way, it's not the recommended way, the best way is to always treat them with respect, always kind of because they're giving you your time, and
time is valuable. They could be doing they could be playing some really awesome game and not your crappy prototype.
And of course, most game makers start off, or a lot of them start off because they see some game they love and they're like, oh, I wish I could make this and I can make it a bit better or a bit different. But in the end, once the people who kind of stick with game development, they're making it because when they see that other person playing, they're like, oh, he's having fun and I made it.
And you'll see that in their eyes, and when they're excited and they're playing, and when that you're on the right track when they're losing track of time and they're still playing the prototype. We had one prototype we worked on, I remember, and it was 2 of our friends were playing, and it was like hours, into the morning, where we lost time.
And what was I gonna say? You lose time, and then also it's nice when you kind of see that the other person is almost more excited than you, if possible. But I mean, they're like.
But the one,
and that's really awesome. That's a really awesome feeling.
But don't get discouraged if you don't have that in the beginning. I always give this example. If I'm correct, it's an article I read a long time ago. I think it was on Gama Sutra on Mark of the Ninja's post-mortem. We're probably burning all of our food, burnt chicken and eggplants. But anyway, so Mark of the Ninja, really awesome platforming stealth game, probably my favorite. if you haven't played it, you should play it. It's probably super cheap now. Is it by Cappy Games? I always get mixed up who makes what. But anyway, Mark of the Ninja, check it out. Oh yeah, they were saying, if I remember correctly, that they were really worried about the game. It was like, 3 months remaining of the, I guess, years in development, and it still wasn't fun. And they didn't find that fun, and they were really, really scared. And then it just came out of nowhere not out of nowhere, but at the very end, and it was all like the way the levels were created and things were balanced out, and then suddenly it was fun. So don't beat yourself up if you don't have a masterpiece on your prototype. This is just something that it comes over time, and the most important thing at the end is you get something done, you get it polished, you get it out.
Yeah.
Which
like we said, like where we are, for example, right now, it's just the testing. It's more about just seeing how do people at all react, and of course, just getting started with testing.
If they slap you.
They slap you. I don't mean with how they. By the way, just to clarify, not how they interact with you, but with the game.
Yeah.
And kind of where does their mind go when they see it? Even if it's just white boxes, they might have some.
Yeah, they might.
Unique perspective.
They might say like, "Oh, this is a kite in the sky," and you're like, "Oh, this was a racing car game," And then you're like, "I totally didn't even see it from that perspective."
Yeah.
So,
continuing on your previous thing that the fun comes in different stages. I would say depending on what genre game you're making. If you're making a strategy game, it's not going to be fun before you can do strategy.
Yeah.
So that's like an action game probably has more fun much earlier. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing you have to think. Well, not need to think that you can kind of measure when should it be, but do try to push it. Like try to get it as early as possible.
Yeah. And don't try to.
But don't beat yourself up if it doesn't happen.
Yeah. And don't break your fun either. We've done this before.
Or lose
it. Like you find actually with some of the kids that I'm teaching, they'll make some prototypes, and they've had some really interesting like mechanics that show up in the play, and I'm like, wow, that's really awesome. Like I remember one day they had something, it was like a platformer, and the way the characters were splitting up and stuff on the screen. It was actually really interesting, and everybody gathered up, and they were just laughing and having a good time watching what was happening on the screen. And I stopped them all and I said, make sure you don't lose this mechanic, what is going on right now, because this is very core and central to people enjoying, what you have here. And actually they ended up losing it, and they did all these other features and stuff. So you can actually end up drowning and killing your game or the fun in your game. And what you need to do in that step is, well, you might later realize, okay, it wasn't really that fun and we just thought it was, and you get to a point where like, okay, this isn't going anywhere, and you should kill it as fast as possible and move on. Or what you do is you should take a step back always and say like, okay, where was it fun before? It would be great if you have some type of version control. Maybe that would be a good thing to talk about in the future, like when you're doing like how to set up version control.
Well, we can talk about how to work in a team and with several people.
Yeah.
Like not huge teams, that's a totally different thing. But let's say like from 2 to 5 people. We can talk about kind of things you can set up, which one is version control.
Yeah, but it would be good to go back, say, when was it fun last? And what were we doing then? And what are we doing now? And what did we do between that time? What are the changes? And are they that important? Is this change important enough that it's kind of makes or breaks this game? And if it's not, you probably don't need it and you should drop it.
What I've seen a lot of people who start out, and even we've been guilty for this sometimes, is that
all the time.
We're guilty for everything. That's how we
learn. I am guilty. It is my punishment for being here.
But the thing that happens is that you kind of, let's say you're making a certain genre, like a game for a certain genre, and then you just have this, that for this to fit here, it just has to have that this is the standard or something. And then you kind of, you can't have a first-person shooter without guns. We have to add guns, or we have to have this mechanic. Like you add this mechanic just because everybody else is doing it, and then the unique mechanic you had kind of gets lost in it because it's not anymore interesting.
Exactly.
So I think don't, of course, follow what other people are doing and how the whole, like, you know, how it works, and you know, you play probably the same genre games yourself already, but don't, if it doesn't work, don't force yourself to go that
because
direction.
the genre has it.
Yeah.
Just because you have a roguelike doesn't mean you have to have procedurally generated levels or something like this. So don't let a genre, if that's what we're calling them, let them be kind of an influence or inspiration for you, but don't be bound to them, because I would say as an indie, you're in the perfect position to take risks and do something really interesting and quirky and different that big AAA companies wouldn't even think about, because they're just thinking of the, you know, the bottom dollar, whatever they're thinking about money first, and they won't do something that isn't a guarantee. So they're like, yes, we must have multiplayer, and they'll just cram on multiplayer because it's going to bring more money, when in reality it might actually make the game worse. So, but I think
but then after you've just to finish it up, like, okay, after that, review your learning. So go through your notes, like once you've done all these, like a good batch of, like the first test can just be with 2 to 5 people, like testers, not at the same time, of course, but separately. And then, you know, then you can make the group larger, but as you go, if you want to, but 2 to 5, and then review your notes, go through them, and kind of see and try to reflect like your vision of what the game, what did they say, did it match, and then think about, should you change the game, like change the whole kind of vision a bit, like, oh, it's not going to be a FPS, or should it be, you know, a bit something else? But don't feel obligated, like do that consciously, not just running off in some direction and suddenly you're lost in the forest. Like, it's not, the game doesn't anymore fit anywhere. But review that, see what you learned, and then do the next version, call it Alpha 2 or whatever you call it, and then you do a test again, and then take some of the old people and get some new people.
Yeah, and you keep repeating that over and over. You'll know when you're at a different phase. So, but we can talk about more of that in the future. And then if you guys have any questions, that I'm sure this probably opens up more questions, but if you have any questions, you can always, you know, send us a message.
Yeah, on Twitter
or wherever.
or
However you can send us a message on some social media or some link, and we'll do our best to answer. Or, you know, we don't know everything, but if we don't know, we can find out from somebody.
Yeah, so we're not the experts on everything, but we have a good network of people who are experts, and we can ask them. And of course, we can give us our opinions, which this whole thing is about, like our subjective opinions about things and how we see the gaming world and game development. But please follow, subscribe, like, do all the whatever terminology in your platform is, and
we'll see you next. Actually, next week we're not going to be here.
Yeah, well, that's actually something. Yeah, let's talk about that time. We're going to Milan just on a trip.
That's in Italy, by the way, for all my friends in the U.S.
or otherwhere. Anyway, we might do some kind of streaming if we can get like phone streaming on, so we can say hi. But we won't be doing a whole evening of streaming or video
during the week. But let's see, maybe we can sneak something in. But
we'll
if
try
not,
to have something. But yeah, next week is kind of like Tuesday is gonna be the day off.
Yeah, Tuesday. But on Thursday, Björn will still be having his
let's make a
come
game.
dev with me.
Yeah. So we'll be developing our game, and you can join then. And that's it.
See ya.
See ya.
Let's eat.
Yeah.